Ever felt that frustrating moment when you desperately need something and it's just gone? Or maybe the flip side, you're tripping over boxes of something you bought way too much of. We've all been there, I think, whether it's, flour in the pantry or in the business world, maybe critical components for a manufacturing line. Today, we're not just looking at the basics. We're taking a real deep dive. We're getting into the precise mathematical strategies businesses use. We're actually drawing insights straight from some advanced financial certification materials to discover the secrets behind concepts like economic order quantity, or EOQ, and optimal reorder levels.
Yeah, it sounds simple on the surface, inventory control, but it's really a delicate, kind of continuous balancing act. You're constantly weighing the advantages of having enough stock, like being able to meet customer demand, maybe grabbing those bulk discounts you see advertised. But you weigh that against the very real headaches of holding too much. And that includes storage expenses, capital getting tied up, and, the risk of products becoming obsolete or simply going bad.
Okay, so our mission today is really to unpack the clever calculations and strategies that help companies find that just right sweet spot.
Okay.
This is for anyone who wants to sort of peek behind the curtain of supply chain efficiency.
Right. And you might think this level of detail, EOQ and all that, is only for massive corporations with warehouses the size of small towns. But honestly, the core principles of knowing how much to order and when to order it, they apply surprisingly broadly. We're going to explore not just the what, but really the why it matters for anyone curious about efficient operations and resource management in general.
What's really fascinating here as we start digging into these notes is how often the simplest seeming decisions in a business are actually backed by layers of pretty complex calculation. I'm genuinely curious to see how deep this rabbit hole goes, especially when we start talking about hitting those just right sweet spots. Okay, let's unpack this. So maybe let's kick things off with a really fundamental question. Why even hold inventory? I mean, from a distance, it just looks like money sitting there on a shelf, right? What's the compelling upside?
That's a crucial starting point. And there are definitely upsides that justify the initial cost. First and foremost, it's about meeting customer demand. Simple as that. If you don't have the product ready, you lose the sale.
And maybe the customer.
And potentially the customer, exactly. Then there are the financial incentives, bulk discounts. Buying larger quantities often reduces the per unit cost, which is always attractive. And importantly, by ordering less frequently, even if the orders are bigger, you significantly reduce your total annual reordering costs. Think about all the admin work, the delivery fees, the processing time involved with every single order.
Okay, understood. So meeting demand, saving on unit costs, cutting down on ordering hassle. Those are big pluses. But those benefits certainly come with significant trade-offs, don't they? Every advantage seems to have kind of hidden cost attached. What are the major downsides that companies wrestle with when they stock up?
Precisely. The flip side of holding inventory involves, significant costs. You have direct storage expenses like warehousing, utilities, insurance. That's the obvious stuff. Then there's the capital tied up in that inventory money that could be invested elsewhere, generating returns. Opportunity cost. And the risks are very real. Products can deteriorate, they can become obsolete because a new model comes out, or they can even be stolen. Shrinkage, they call it. So the core aim of things like EOQ and reorder levels is really to find that optimal balance, that precise compromise level between these competing forces.
Okay, that brings us nicely to the economic order quantity, or EOQ.
Yes.
This is all about figuring out how much to order at one time. What's the core principle that drives this calculation? What's it balancing?
Right. The underlying principle is that as the quantity you order each time goes up, two things happen at the same time. First, your average inventory level increases, right? Because you're holding more stuff on average. And with it, your total annual cost of holding that inventory also rises. Storage, capital, risk all go up. But on the flip side, as your order quantity gets larger, the number of individual orders you place throughout the year decreases. Fewer orders mean lower total annual reorder costs. So you're managing this push and pull. Holding costs go up, ordering costs go down.
Fascinating. So you're essentially looking for that equilibrium point, that sweet spot where the combined total of your annual holding costs and your annual reorder costs is at its absolute minimum. And that quantity is the EOQ.
That's it, exactly.
It sounds like there must be some pretty specific assumptions that make this calculation work cleanly, though. It can't always be that simple in the real world.
Absolutely. The basic EOQ formula, to be really effective and give you that clean answer, it assumes a few things are stable. It assumes a consistent purchase price per unit, stable demand over time, no huge seasonal swings, and a fixed predictable lead time.
Lead time being the delay between ordering and receiving.
Correct. That reliable period between placing an order and getting the goods. It also assumes holding costs are directly proportional to your average inventory level, and that the cost of placing an order is fixed, regardless of the size of that order. These assumptions allow for a sort of predictable sawtooth pattern of inventory levels over time, making the calculation foundational for, let's say, stable environments.
And there's a mathematical core to this, right? I remember seeing a formula. Can you give us a sense of what goes into it, maybe without making us feel like we're back in calculus class?
No calculus required, promise. Think of it this way. The formula for the total annual cost, which you're trying to minimize to find the EOQ, is essentially the sum of those two forces we just discussed. Total annual holding costs plus total annual reordering costs. One goes up with quantity, one goes down. The EOQ itself is derived by mathematically balancing these two. There's a square root in the formula, yeah? Mm-hmm. That's because you're essentially finding a kind of geometric mean, balancing the rate at which holding costs rise and ordering costs fall. It pinpoints that optimal intersection point mathematically.
So it sounds powerful, but it's not just about plugging numbers in blindly. It sounds like you have to be really careful about which numbers you're feeding into this equation. Yeah. What are the common pitfalls there? Getting the costs wrong.
Precisely. That's a huge one. You absolutely need to focus on relevant costs. Only include costs that are directly affected by the order quantity decision. Ask yourself, if I double my usual order size, does this specific cost actually change? For example, things like fixed salaries for storekeepers they get paid, regardless of how many items are moved in one go, typically wouldn't be included because they don't vary with the order quantity itself.
Okay, so variable costs related to ordering or holding.
Exactly. And crucially, ensure all your units are consistent. If demand is annual, holding costs should be annual per unit. All currency figures should be uniform. It's about comparing apples to apples. Otherwise, the formula gives you nonsense.
Right. This leads us perfectly into a scenario every business faces. Bulk discounts. On the surface, they sound like a no-brainer, instant savings. But I'm guessing, based on what you said, it's rarely that simple in practice.
It's almost never that simple. While a lower purchase price per item is incredibly tempting, you have to remember the trade-off. If you buy more to get the discount, your average inventory goes up, and so do your total annual holding costs. More space, more capital tied up, more risk. The common and really the essential approach to evaluating a bulk discount is what we often call trial and error. But it's a calculated trial and error. You meticulously compare the total annual cost, and now you absolutely must include the actual purchasing cost of the inventory itself in this comparison at your calculated EOQ level, against the total annual cost if you accept the discount at the new, larger order quantity required to get that discount.
So you're not just looking at the sticker price per unit, you're looking at the entire financial picture for the year, including those hidden or maybe not so hidden costs that buying in bulk might trigger. Our sources give an example from a company, more limited, considering a 1% discount on a raw material. What was the truly counterintuitive truth that case study revealed? It wasn't just about the math, was it?
No, it really wasn't just the math. More Limited's case study showed something powerful and often overlooked. That seemingly tempting 1% bulk discount, while saving nearly, $1,800 on paper for the units themselves, it masked a deeper challenge. The real insight wasn't just doing the total cost calculation, which you still have to do, but the critical need to assess if their physical storage and operational capacity could even handle the larger order.
The practicalities.
Exactly. Can we actually fit this stuff somewhere? Do we have the forklifts, the staff time to manage it? So it's not just a math problem on a spreadsheet, it's a strategic logistical puzzle. It forces companies to weigh potential dollar savings against the very real constraints of their physical world. Sometimes the answer is no, even if the numbers look good initially.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so knowing how much to order with EOQ is one major piece, but knowing when to place that order is just as critical, maybe even more so, in preventing disruptions. That brings us to reorder levels. What happens if a company gets this timing wrong?
Oh, the consequences can be significant, really significant. If you order too late when inventory levels are already critically low, you risk a stockout. That means no product to sell or no material for production. That leads directly to lost sales, frustrated customers, maybe even shutting down a production line. Huge costs.
Ouch.
But if you order too soon, while you still have plenty of stock left over from the last order, your average inventory levels and all those associated holding costs we talked about will be unnecessarily high. You're paying to store stuff you don't need yet.
All right.
So the reorder level aims to prevent both extremes. It tries to strike that perfect timing balance.
And the most straightforward scenario, theoretically, is when there's zero lead time, right? If only that were the real world.
Wouldn't that be nice? Theoretically, yes. If lead time, that gap between placing an order and receiving it, was magically zero, you could just wait until you literally ran out, hit order, and poof, new inventory instantly appears. Your reorder level would be 0 units.
Sounds like science fiction for logistics.
Pretty much. In reality, that's almost impossible. Suppliers always take some time. Even if it's just a few hours for a local delivery, there's always a lead time.
Okay, so for the real world, let's take a common case. Constant demand and a fixed, predictable lead time. How do you determine that reorder level then? What's the simple rule of thumb there?
In that common scenario, thankfully, it's quite straightforward. Your reorder level is simply the demand you expect during that lead time period. For instance, if your supplier consistently takes, say, 5 days to deliver, and you consistently use 30 units of that item every day, you need to place your next order when you still have 150 units left in stock.
5 days times 30 units a day.
Exactly, 150 units. That ensures you have just enough to cover demand during those 5 days of waiting, and the new order arrives just as you run out of the old stock. It's elegantly simple when things are perfectly predictable.
But of course, life isn't usually perfectly predictable. Demand isn't always perfectly constant, and lead times themselves can vary. Suppliers might be late sometimes. What about that frustrating uncertainty? How do businesses protect themselves against those unpredictable fluctuations? You can't just hope for the best.
No, you definitely can't just hope. That's precisely where buffer inventory comes into play, sometimes called safety stock. Buffer inventory is essentially the amount by which your reorder level exceeds the average expected demand during the average lead time.
So it's extra stock.
It's extra stock, exactly. It's a safety net, an additional cushion built into your reorder point. Its primary purpose is to significantly reduce the chance of a stock out when there's unexpected variability, a sudden spike in demand, or the supplier delivering late. It's stock held specifically to absorb those fluctuations and mitigate the potentially very costly impact of shortages.
And presumably holding that extra buffer stock has its own cost too, right? Back to the holding cost.
Absolutely. More inventory means higher holding costs. So there's another trade-off.
Okay, so are there ways to figure out the optimal reorder level, one that accounts for these complexities and the true cost of uncertainty, balancing the cost of holding buffer stock against the cost of potential stockouts? It sounds like it could get very tricky.
It definitely adds layers of complexity, but yes, there are established approaches, assuming you have decent data to work with. One main way is the tabular approach. This involves calculating for several possible reorder levels, each implying a different amount of buffer stock, the expected annual cost of holding that buffer inventory, versus the expected annual cost incurred if the buffer isn't enough, the stockout cost we talked about. Loss contribution margin, maybe emergency order fees. You estimate the probabilities of different demand levels during lead time, calculate the expected costs for each potential reorder level, and choose the level where the total of holding and stockout costs is minimized.
Okay, a cost minimization approach again, but factoring in probabilities.
Exactly. The other common method is the service level approach. Here, management decides on an acceptable probability of running out of inventory. They might say, we want a 95% service level, meaning they accept a 5% chance of a stock out during any given order cycle.
So they set a risk tolerance.
Precisely. They set a strategic tolerance for risk. Then, using statistical data about the historical variability in demand and lead time, they calculate the amount of buffer stock needed to achieve that target service level. This determines the reorder level.
Wow, okay. So we've journeyed through quite a bit here in this deep dive into inventory control today. From the elegant EOQ formula trying to minimize those holding and ordering costs to the absolutely critical timing of reorder levels designed to prevent those damaging stockouts or wasteful overstocking.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating here, I think, is how seemingly simple decisions about how much and when are actually backed by a really nuanced understanding of trade-offs. You're constantly balancing holding costs against reordering costs. You're considering the true value and cost of buffer inventory needed to manage uncertainty. And remember that bulk discount example. Accepting one isn't always a straightforward win. You absolutely have to factor in the total cost impact, including those increased holding expenses, and even the practicalities of just having space for the stuff.
So thinking about our listeners, what does this all mean for you? Well, next time you see a store shelf perfectly stocked, or perhaps one that's surprisingly empty, You might think a little differently about these sort of invisible decisions and calculations happening behind the scenes to make that happen or fail to happen. And this maybe raises an important question. Where else in your life or work could understanding these core principles, balancing just enough versus too much or too little, truly make a difference?
That's a great takeaway. It really is about optimizing resources and reducing risk at its core, whether you're managing a massive warehouse or, frankly, just managing your own time and energy. You can think about the cost of holding on to an unneeded commitment versus the maybe cost of reordering a missed opportunity if you free up resources. The parallels are kind of everywhere once you start looking through that lens.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging, keep learning, and stay curious.